Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm Brian Doyle here with you today, and we're going to have a fun conversation today. I mean, unless you guys are all burnt out on the word AI, of course, but all kidding aside, I think we're going to have a very fun conversation because this is about real world practical application. And I think that's the area that, as I talk to MSPs in my day-to-day role, is the biggest struggle. What can we provide? How can we provide it? So I'd like to welcome to the show Shane Naugher. Shane Naugher has double duty. He is the CEO and founder of DaZZee. Did I say it right? I think I just screwed it up again, Shane.
DaZZee IT Services. Yeah.
DaZZee, the jazzy part. I got to get that right. And then he is also the founder of Innovative Automations, which is a firm that's really focused on helping MSPs bring automation and AI to life within their customer base. So, Shane, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's always a great conversation with you. I appreciate you having me back and more importantly, having the conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. We find things out by accident sometimes, right? And candidly, folks, Shane's been working with us over at VCIO Toolbox for a while, and we were just having our standard quarterly meeting and talking about some new features. And, oh, by the way, this is what we're doing now. And I'm like, ooh, that's more interesting than anything I have to share. So I'm really excited about that. But before we get into that story, Shane, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up, owning both an MSP and then, starting this new firm to drive automation?
Absolutely. Well, and I think the last time I was on with you, we talked about the fact that my days go. We have similar backgrounds back to the telecom industry because I had a dial-up ISP business, if you can believe that, way back in the day. But we started our MSP business back in 2000. So we just celebrated our 25th anniversary on the MSP business. And, it's been a fun journey learning that industry. We're always in pursuit of perfection, but it's always a work in progress. But being in that space, MSP is a mature business model at this point that most people have seen, various foundations to run it from. And so, we have, like I say, celebrated 25 years of that. About almost 2 years ago, we saw the need for some AI and automations consulting for our client base. And so that kind of launched us into our next venture, which is, as you mentioned, Innovative Automation.
So, it's funny how new ventures spring out of new needs, right? And we were talking a little bit prior to recording today that while AI is certainly the new need that's driving the conversation, really at its core, there's a lot of traditional automation that's been out there and in place, but it's gotten more intelligent now as we moved into this next generation. Talk a little bit about some of the misnomers and then some of the realities of what you're trying to put together, because I think the MSP community is just struggling with where does this all fit when I'm talking to a client, and where should I be having the conversations about automation and AI?
No, and that's a great point because everyone knows, and we're seeing AI dominate all the conversations. It is the talking point, the buzzword that everyone throws out there. But at the end of the day, really what everyone is looking for at its core level is automation. Whether you leverage AI as part of that or not is a different discussion. And automation technology has been around for decades. RPA platforms typically have been more focused on the enterprise space, but that technology's been there. You could build business process automation for years now. It was more rules based, meaning everyone that's been in the technology space is probably familiar with if this then that. So it's that same type of methodology, only now with AI, we're laying intelligence on top of that so that as we look at automations, we can make those more from, a more intelligent perspective as opposed to just a strict rule. So in terms of how this translates to the MSP space, really kind of what started that for us, we were building a lot of internal automations and layering AI on top of it. And as we were talking to some of our clients, they're saying, well, we've heard a lot about AI. How do we use this? And so that pushed us deeper into the conversation with them. And then helping them understand that, again, it's about automation as opposed to just simply using AI. It drove more and more conversations about what is an effective use of AI is not just a shiny new toy that we want to go out and use. It has to drive some business outcomes, and so that's kind of what launched us down this path. And really, the journey has been more about helping our clients understand, as you mentioned, what is the practical use that provides an ROI. And so, yeah, that's kind of what took us down this route. We started doing more and more of that with our clients. And as we were talking to more and more MSPs in our peer groups and at industry events, it's a common conversation of how do we bring this to our clients in a meaningful way.
Right. And, you know, some of what you just talked about there is some of the things that I hear too. Like, you know, there's been this big push. Hey, if you want to implement AI, identify something that you're doing manually that is a repeatable process that's kind of low level that you want to automate. Well, it's easy to say that. We all have a ton of tasks that we could probably identify there, but where is the return? Which ones should take precedence? Which ones are really going to push the needle, maybe not just for that task, but integrate into other business flows and really, you know, make this a much more involved, profitable, more efficient, productive, you know, pick your poison in terms of buzzwords, but, you know, process. What are you seeing as some of the top areas as you've been embarking on this that automation gains can happen for traditional everyday small to mid-sized business?
You know, the first place that we always go to look is in the existing application stack, because most of the time, almost every organization we go into, they're all using separate line of business applications, and they may or may not have, you know, native integrations to talk to each other. That's the low-hanging fruit. Look for opportunities to connect the data, simply because even if there's not a native integration, there may be an open API where you can build that integration. That is the low-hanging fruit. Now, if you're not familiar with building API, integrations directly, you know, that's kind of where we launched into innovative automations. But that is the discussion to start with, simply because, you know, that's an application or applications that they're already familiar with. They've got workflows already there. You're just basically enabling the communication between those. And so that's where we typically will start.
So, you know, when I think about that too, right? I've got, you know, we're a business that has, you know, a financial system, a CRM system, you know, and all these have common customer data, different use cases around it. APIs certainly can connect, but if there's not API availability, are you building, you know, kind of data lakes, if you will, or kind of pulling data to a central source so you can kind of take that and then make things move the way you want? And again, I'm not looking for the secret sauce. I'm just trying to understand how do
Yeah.
you move around some of the obstacles that exist sometimes when you're looking at different applications?
No, and it's a great point because, depending on what industry, you know, the MSP serves, a lot of times they're going to have legacy applications that don't have an API. And so to your point, can you get that data into a data lake to where then you can transform that data, manipulate it the way you need to, and make it useful? The other option that we look at is if there's a significant manual process that can be automated, you can look at a traditional RPA platform. If you're familiar with that space, you know, you've got the UiPaths of the world, the big players when it comes to RPA. And basically, that's going to be a bot that lives on a machine that would mimic someone going and clicking on a menu, filling in data into, one of the data capture fields and executing. Everything that you do from a human perspective can be replicated through a traditional RPA platform. The drawback to that approach is that typically license costs are going to be the barrier to entry. And so you've got to have a good good ROI there. So yeah, in terms of how you go about it, we always tell folks we can automate pretty much anything that's occurring. It just comes down to, is there an ROI in terms of the development time, the licensing cost, and the support after.
Awesome. So, you know, I know you've launched innovative automations to help the MSP community. What does a typical engagement feel like if I'm the MSP, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm letting you into the home now. So what does that feel like?
Well, and to that point, when we started building out this service, we were, with our MSP business, we were considering, do we just add this as an additional service that we provide? But after we talked to more and more MSPs that are saying, hey, you mind sharing with us or helping us with this project? We realized that there was a need for that as an additional standalone offering. And so the way we engage, we do a non-compete. So anytime that an MSP brings us into their client environment, we go in with full authority that we're not going to get into any type of MSP services. And in fact, our goal is to if we can bring MSP services to the table as part of that discussion, we had one opportunity that the MSP had been trying to push migration to Microsoft 365. Believe it or not, it was this on-premise Exchange server that still exists today. And part of the automation discussion was, we can build this, but you really need to move to MSP 365 to get more services to make this more impactful. So, typically, we try to partner with the MSP, help them identify what are the low-hanging automations that can drive real ROI to bring value to their client base, and does that also pair along with any of the type of services that they want to move their client forward with? So our goal is to make sure that we're bringing value. Back in the day when SOC was the big push, you either had to make the decision: are we going to build our own internal SOC, or are we going to partner with someone? And so our goal is, from the AI and automation side, that same type of concept. How do we help augment what the MSP is doing, so that they've got a trusted partner to bring in that also bolsters their services that they're offering to their clients?
And I think as we're going through the kind of the industry shift that we're going through right now, which, you've been around long enough, I've been around long enough, that happens, every 5 to 7 years, where there's kind of a major change that goes on. And I think one of the biggest things that's happened over the last, let's call it 2 waves, was the willingness of the MSP to recognize, I don't need to build it all. I need to be really good at managing the relationship. I need to be really good at kind of being the advisor, building that next level of leadership into the relationship, and reaching down for the tooling that we just don't have the staff for. We were talking a little before this, but if I were to build, an MSP tomorrow, I probably wouldn't start with level 1 help desk. Where before it was, how many guys could I get in to answer those phones, right? And
right, exactly.
And it's really changed the game. And I think the MSP community is more comfortable with, if I can find a true strong partner who's got the right values that align with us, who can bring the solutions to roost, I would rather engage them so we can focus on what we need to focus on. And SOC was a great example where I think that trend really started taking off, because people realized, hey, we can't afford those resources. And by tapping into a greater group, they've had more success. And I see that kind of shifting now as we go into AI as well.
Yeah, and that's an important part, because, as we've been doing this now for almost 2 years, like I say, MSPs have come to us and have asked, how do we bring this to our clients? And the challenge is, if they're not familiar with the automation technologies, the AI, obviously everyone's probably at least familiar with how to represent ChatGPT and Copilot and those common things. But getting to that business process automation has been the challenge. And we've got in terms of audits that they would conduct, we've got a checklist that they can build right into VCIO Toolbox that they can use. But we're still getting some feedback that, hey, we're still not comfortable with that conversation. So one of the things we've just rolled out this year is the Chief AI Officer approach. Years ago, VCIO was the big push. And to your point, starting a new MSP, you probably aren't going to focus as much on that level 1 help desk. You're probably focusing more on the consultative side. When it comes to that Chief AI Officer, that's where we're seeing the skills gap today. And so that's one of the offerings that we can assist with when it comes to those MSPs. We can bring that type of offering to their MSP and partner with them to deliver those services and that consultation. So when it comes to finding what is the best automation to target, what are the API capabilities that are there, what are the additional software layers that can be added on this, they don't have to have that in-house, but they can still get that expertise to go to their clients with and deliver that in a strategic manner.
And you're hitting on the biggest challenge I think that we have still, is people don't know what are the right questions to ask, right?
Exactly.
They're not versed in that, and and it's not something you can magically get overnight, right? Because like anything, unless you're in it to win it, it's sometimes tough to identify where it's at. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and keep me honest in this conversation, it sounds like you're supporting them right from pre-sales through project. So really helping them, make sure they identify the right solutions, probably even giving them guidance when it's not the right project either.
Absolutely. We had one client or an MSP that brought their client to us that wanted to build automation, and they had a huge need for it, but they were using an ERP that was over 20 years old. And, they were saying, can you automate this? And yes, we can. We'll use a traditional RPA bot that will go and do every click that you're doing. But the money you're going to spend on this really should be spent on upgrading your ERP. And so helping them understand where the dollars are best spent, even if it's to our detriment in terms of our business, that's our goal, is to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So,
Yeah, but I think as an old MSP guard as well, sometimes saying no to the project's the bigger win than saying yes, because it builds the trust factor that is so critical to our relationships, and usually opens up the door to something bigger later when everybody becomes ready. So I think that's a key part, and I think that's a part that MSPs are looking out of their vendor partnerships these days. Is, hey, let's not fit square pegs in round holes. Let's make sure what we're doing here is really meeting the needs of the customer, and the things that we're buying have the flexibility for us to adapt to the customer needs.
right, absolutely.
Now, are you finding there's any particular industries that are more ripe for this, at this juncture of the API, or excuse me, AI journey? Or is this really open to anybody across the board?
Well, there's certainly, some industries that are more subject to it when it comes to an ROI perspective. In our MSP business, we're heavily focused on manufacturing, and I was thinking at least 2 years ago that they would be the first target we would go after. Reality is that most manufacturers have automated their plant floors, decades ago, and really what hasn't been automated is their front admin offices. That really, when you start looking at headcount and everything, there's not as much ROI there as I initially thought. Where we are seeing the most impact is in the professional services. Your attorneys, your CPAs, your financial firms, people that are billing high, hourly amounts. If you can provide even a fraction of their time back through automation, the ROI is easy to justify there. But in terms of, is there an automation that can apply to every organization? I mean, it's really limitless, but you have to drive to the ROI. Just because you can automate it doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Right, and I think that what you just outlined there with the manufacturing areas is a perfect example of it, right? Because I'm sure every person that is working in that field would think that would be where it springs to mind, but it is an area where they had to get those efficiencies years ago, where they wouldn't have been able to keep the cost down on their products, especially when competing, internationally, for some of that business too, right? So those folks had it on lockdown, and now, front of the house, you see that that's a very small segment, and it's pretty standard fare that they're doing there. Is there one win that you might have been most proud of, or one application that you've delivered that's really interesting that also might help, a user think, hey, I've got customers like that. I should call Shane.
Well, I've got lists of them. We've had some really cool projects over the last year. Two, if I'm gonna fudge a little bit and say I've got two that I bring up. So we were working with an insurance agency that did a lot of commercial insurance. The way that their process works was their clients filled out their internal application for insurance, and that information was then rekeyed into their carrier portals. And so they were spending, upwards of 45 minutes to an hour rekeying data from their internal application, whether that's a PDF or an actual electronic format. They'd have to go rekey that into the carrier's portal themselves. We actually were able to build, an API call to the portal of each carrier. So now that application process actually sends instantaneously to all of their carriers at once, takes that information that it gets back and reformats it into their internal proposal to their client. So the net savings there was, what was 45 minutes minimum to get a turnaround, we're down to 3 or 4 minutes in terms of processing. So that was one of the first big ones that I was like, man, this is a huge ROI. We're currently working with a fitness influencer that has a pretty big following, and they've had exponential growth over the last year. And they were having to compile, meal plans and exercise and all of the stuff from different sites. And within that application itself, they were spending about an hour and a half per new client. And they've had such tremendous growth that their biggest limitation is their onboarding consultant to put that information together. And so what we were able to build for them was basically a custom app that they can use at this point, not just the connecting. We built the app itself to where now that information goes in, pulls that data, analyzes it with an AI perspective, and formats it into their report. that went from about an hour and a half to about 7 minutes now. So,
Which is
when you start looking at those type of things, again, ROI is the number one driver.
And that's again where the intelligence really comes into play also, right? Because I'm sure those plans are being based on metrics that they're putting in that they measured on these individuals, right? Your plan and my plan will not be the same, right? And for those nuances, you could see where that would take a lot of time. And if you could programmatically do it, my God, I'm sure they're very happy to know you.
It's one of those things that was kind of their bottleneck for their next level of growth. And the owner said, we cannot grow to where we want to go without some type of automation to help us there. And so we're proud of that one.
Awesome. Well, Shane, we're getting to the end of our time. But I certainly want to make sure if you've got any other closing thoughts or if you've got another topic you want to cover, we can do so. I pass the baton to you. Anything else you want to share before we talk about where you're going to be?
Just start having the conversations with your clients. And if you're not comfortable of what to say or how to say it, we're here for you. We can provide, like I say, the checklist that you can pull directly into VCIO Toolbox. If you want to engage us to help with that conversation, we can set up that arrangement as well. Again, with that, chief AI officer, virtual through us, we can help facilitate that for you. But the big thing is, if you aren't having that conversation with your clients, someone will be, and you want to make sure that you're the person leading that.
And Shane, I think I saw out on your website you have a guidebook or something something that can help MSPs kind of get started and at least give them some guidance on how to pick up. So, folks, head over to innovativeautomations.ai and go get that guide, because I think it'll really help you, in just at least understanding what the capabilities and possibilities are.
Exactly. And like I say, have the conversation. Make sure you're the one leading that charge for your clients, because if not, someone else will be in the very near future.
Perfect. And I think if I heard correctly, you're going to be out at one of the shows very soon that I know a good portion of the listeners will be at as well. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm excited. This is our first MSP event that we'll be attending with Innovative Automations. We're actually going to be at the TMT Boot Camp event down in Dallas, Texas, first week of April 7th through the 9th, I believe. It's our first event, so we'd love to have people stop by, and if nothing else, introduce ourselves, have a conversation about how we can give some guidance towards their clients, and if nothing else, talk through what challenges they're facing when it comes to addressing AI and automation with their client base.
That's a fun event, but you're really indoctrinating yourself on a tough vendor event. First one, it's the blessing and the curse. The vendor area is open all the time.
That's what we said. Go big or go home, and we're bringing a team of folks with us down there so that hopefully we can survive the hours that we're on the floor.
Awesome. Well, I wish you the best in that. I wish you the best, of course, with what you're doing here at Innovative. I'm really excited to continue watching where this goes and see, and hopefully, you keep getting that message out to the MSP community, because there's never been a better time for them to really level up with their customers. And this is a perfect leveling up conversation to have. So Shane, thank you so much for joining me. Listeners, Shane's LinkedIn link will be in the show notes as always. We'll also have links to both of his companies. So if you're interested in learning about his MSP, as much about innovation and automation, you can go there. I encourage you to reach out. He's one of the go-givers out in the community as well. Happy to help you, even if you just need a little bit of information to understand what the possibilities are. Shane, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Always a great conversation.
Take care, and listeners, we'll see you again next week.